Hi, everybody. We're just going to do a quick audio test. If you can hear me, please type yes into the chat box. Alrighty, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our summer CPE learning series session, Technology Behind Payment Management for Nonprofits, Part 2. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Materials for today's presentation can be found in the toolbar located on the right of your screen. At the bottom of the toolbar, you will see a question box. All questions pertaining to the webinar content will be answered at the end. We will do our best to address them. Please be sure to answer all polling questions to ensure that you receive CPE credit for today's session. Once the webinar is over, there will be a pop-up asking you to complete a survey of today's session. Please take a moment to complete it. It's our way of being able to provide you with the best and most relevant programs possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wally. Wally, I think you're muted.
There we go. How's that? My apologies. Welcome, everyone, to the Integrated Credit Card Solution for Accounting Team's presentation. EBizCharge is going to join us from Century Business Solutions. EBizCharge is the actual processor, and we're going to be talking a little bit today about payment processing as it relates to nonprofits. It really describes the handling, if you will, of donors' financial information, for online transactions, whether submitting a donation, buying merchandise, paying a membership fee, registering for an event. All these things are areas that a payment processor may be used. Along our path today, we're going to talk a little bit about, how does this payment processing work? Why credit card? Why for a not-for-profit? What the heck is PCI compliance, and why do I need to worry about it? Security features, all these things are going to sort of come into play during the discussion as we go through it. You're going to learn new terms probably, or maybe terms that you know, and try to understand them as we embark on understanding the differences between payment processors and what an online donation tool, like a tool like, say, a NetSuite or a Sage Intacct that might be dedicated and specific for the not-for-profit space. Why then in turn would I also need a payment processor? So understanding sort of those nuances and differences as we go through and look at these particular tools in the space. There are many that are out there as we think of sort of security and the security around what a donor might need on their side and on your side to protect the security of their information and to protect yourselves against any hacks or cyber attacks, etc. So all those things go into the thought process about understanding the gateway and understanding how you're going to set up your merchant account and where that donor might come into your database and how to keep track of, name, address, email is something that's been around for a long time. But if now you're storing credit card information and other pieces, what does that mean to you as a not-for-profit? And how will this money get deposited in the appropriate place and be tracked appropriately? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Stephen and Stephen Wolfson from Century Business Solutions, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about integrated credit card solution for accounting teams. Stephen, welcome.
Very good. Thank you very much, Wally and Ashley, and thank you to the entire Withum team. Just by way of introduction, my name is Stephen Wolfson. I'm Director of Strategic Accounts and Client Services here at Century Business Solutions. And you may hear me refer to us as EBizCharge. EBizCharge is the name of our product that we've developed and that we specifically work with not-for-profits to provide. Wanted to speak more in a general sense too, in terms of from an AR standpoint specifically, what a lot of the terminology that Wally just mentioned and was so kind to introduce to us, what that terminology is, why it's important, right, and how you can locate a solution that's going to allow you to incorporate all of those concepts of payment gateway, tokenization, merchant processing, e-check payments, EMV chip card technology. Just as a few examples, I'm sure many of you have heard of some of those terms in the past. You may be using those types of services in one way or another, but finding the right combination and piecing the puzzle together is something that can be very challenging, especially for not-for-profit organizations. So we're definitely going to touch on how that can be integrated in a more cohesive way. So again, thank you for the introduction, and we'll go ahead and get started. with that said, I think we have a poll question for everybody. So Ashley, I'll turn it over to you so we can start with the first poll question.
All right, great. I will launch the first question. So what is the one thing your organization is most focused on improving in regard to accounts receivable this year? PCI compliance and payment security, lowering our processing fees, cutting down time spent chasing past due invoice payments, simplifying our accounts receivable workflow overall, or last but not least, better reporting on accounts receivable data. So just make sure you are answering all of the polling questions for today so you can receive your credit.
And is this a timed poll, Ashley?
It's not timed. I just have my own little timer in my own head, but we will give it, I give it just about a minute.
Sounds good. I never used to like multiple choice back in school, so give everyone a couple extra minutes just because I want to help them out.
Perfect. I like the consideration. It looks like we almost have, I can see on my end, we have 92% of the votes, so I'll wait just another few seconds.
Great.
All right, and we're going to close it out and share the results. So it looks like we have a tie. The top two that came in were cutting down the time spent chasing past due invoice payments and simplifying our accounts receivable workflow overall. Both of those were ranked at the top choice.
Okay, great. Well, I think many of you are going to love what comes next because we're definitely going to address both of those areas in quite a bit of detail. So we'll touch on all 5 of these particular pain points. I think they're all important. The security one typically doesn't get top billing. I'm not surprised to see that that wasn't one of the top results here in the poll, but it's one of those types of things where once you have a security breach, heaven forbid, or you have some sort of a security concern or some sort of malware attack, suddenly in retrospect, it becomes very important. So we'll definitely touch on that, but from a standpoint of cutting down time spent chasing past due payments, we'll expand that a little bit to also incorporate easier ways to allow donors to make payments to you, collecting on site, taking in recurring donations, one-time donations. That's an area I think that definitely can be improved, and that's high on the priority list for nonprofit organizations. And in terms of simplifying the accounts receivable workflow, integration is key there, right? If you have disparate systems that are not talking to each other, it can lead to quite a bit of additional double entry. Human error oftentimes occurs as a result, right? We're all human, as good as we may be, as accurate as we can be, maybe 99% of the time, there will be that 1% of the time where transferring information from one accounts receivable system to another, there's an additional 0 that gets typed in at the end, let's say before the decimal point. So integration would automate that process to eliminate that and make things run a lot more smoothly. So definitely excited to see those results, and we'll get to talking through that. Thank you, Ashley, for going through that.
Sure.
So just a little background on Century Business Solutions, on EBizCharge, and I guess why we're qualified to have this conversation with you all is we've been in business since 2004, and our vision, the entire purpose for our being, is to be different from other credit card processing companies and payment acceptance companies in the space. Depending on your individual organization, you may be working with your bank, and a division of that bank that has offered merchant services for accepting payments. You may be working with some sort of an online disruptor type company like a Stripe or a PayPal or a Square to accept donations and payments. There are other privately held credit card processing and payment acceptance companies out there that provide their services. But ultimately, none of those companies, for the most part, have the complete suite of connections in the AR space that we've been fortunate enough to build over the last 17 years since we started. We'll talk about some of those payment integrations in detail, which software systems are already integrated for payments that you may be able to take advantage of, as well as the opportunity to integrate anew to software systems that we haven't heard of yet. We have an in-house development team I'll speak about a bit later. Wally had mentioned payment gateway as one of the terminologies when introducing me a few minutes ago. We do have our own payment gateway, which is called EBizCharge. That is extremely important. If you are working with a bank, if you are working with a private credit card processing and payment acceptance company that doesn't own and operate their own payment gateway, you may be familiar with terms like authorize.net or PayPal, PayFlow Pro. CyberSource is a popular one as well, especially in the NetSuite space. These are common payment gateways that are available to all sorts of credit card processing companies, so they can be leveraged as a tool to allow you to accept payments and take donations. However, they're not actually owned, controlled, updated, and operated by the actual processor that you work with in all cases. So, for example, if you're working with a B of A or a Chase or Wells Fargo, a local community bank or a credit union, they don't, most likely have their own software that they've developed to be able to make accepting payments easier. So they may simply just link you up with a third party like authorize.net to be able to make your system work the way that it should. Where that becomes an issue at times is when something goes wrong, right? There's a glitch in the software that you use to take those donations. You have some sort of error on a transaction. When you reach out to the processing company or the bank, right, they say, well, we don't know. Why don't we talk to authorize.net? Authorize.net, may look, and internally they don't see anything that's necessarily wrong on their configuration, and they might point you back towards your processor or your bank. So having an all-in-one solution, a provider that can handle both the payment processing and is their own payment gateway, whether it's us or anyone else that does that, is extremely important to kind of building in simplicity and streamlining procedures for a not-for-profit. Mentioned in-house development, we'll touch on that more later. In-house customer service is also extremely important. If you have had an issue on the payment side, if you have, let's say, an online website where you have e-commerce set up for folks to be able to purchase merchandise from you, you may have had issues with fraudsters and criminals going online and trying to test out multiple card numbers to see if they can happen to stumble on one to commit fraud against. We've had people from different countries that steal credit card information and try to utilize that on web stores like that. That can be really challenging to deal with. You want to make sure that you have a team that is familiar with the way that your payment process is set up, that has the ability to control and affect the fraud prevention settings for that particular tool, and that is available to you 24/7. You want to be able to pick up the phone, talk to someone who knows the software you're using, how it interfaces with the folks that are making donations and payments on your website or over the phone to you, and that has specific knowledge in the payment acceptance space so that they can quickly and efficiently address anything that may come up before too much damage is done. About us, a little bit more just to give you some background. We process over $6 billion in payments per year. We do have, as it says here, over 40,000 users. Over 100 out-of-the-box software integrations, which we'll touch on here in a moment, and the list is ever growing. And of course, like I mentioned, we've been in business for 17 years. From a growth standpoint, we've been blessed that we are one of the Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies 4 years running. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think folks are responding really positively to not having to have a separate credit card processor, a separate payment gateway, a separate development team that you engage to tie all your systems together, and a separate company that provides support. By bundling all of that, we've seen great success. So it's definitely something that is a need out there. Simplifying that accounts receivable process came up as a really popular poll result. So let's dive right in, in a moment here in terms of how we can help do that. With that said, Ashley, a drum roll, please. I think I can turn the floor back over to you for our second poll question.
All right. Polling question number 2. Which area of work within your finance team would you currently class as being the least efficient? Payments, invoicing, forecasting and budgeting, document processing, or expense management? And again, just make sure to get those votes in. Like Steven said, multiple choice sometimes can be a little intimidating, so we'll give you a little extra time. Oh, we got 20% all across the board for each. I can see the votes as they come in.
Wow, that's consistent. Spread pretty evenly.
It has spiked up a bit from one particular answer. We'll see what we end up closing out with. All right, in just a few seconds. Look at that, 100% votes. So I will close it out and share the results. All right, so the winner is document processing.
All right, very good. What were the, just out of curiosity, what were the percentages for each of the 5 options?
Yeah, so we have document processing at 31% of the votes. And then right under that is a tie for both forecasting and budgeting, and then expense management. And then below that, we have 15% of the votes at payments and 8% of the votes at invoicing.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Ashley.
No problem.
Great. So let's dive into one of the concepts that we talked about earlier, which is the ability to integrate. That is so important. And given that I know Withum and Century, both of our companies, focus and work in the not-for-profit space, but we've worked with other types of companies as well. Every single vertical, every single industry has specific software systems that are better geared for that particular industry, right? They just happen to have the right combination of features and benefits. Maybe they offer advantageous pricing for not-for-profit organizations, for example. So before I dive into what we're seeing here on the screen with quite a few different accounting software systems and e-commerce platforms listed, Wally, if you don't mind, I'd like to engage you for a second and kind of pick your brain. From your experience working with companies in this not-for-profit space, what are maybe a couple of the systems that you've come across most often from an accounting standpoint? What seems to be the most popular with nonprofit organizations?
Excellent, Steve. You're sharing your web page, not the deck. So maybe get the deck up and we can look at that slide together.
How are we looking now?
There we go. Now we're looking good. Yeah, so when we look at here, a lot of times when we're putting technology in, QuickBooks seems to be very prevalent in some of the, smaller to mid-sized not-for-profits. NetSuite, Sage Intacct, and Microsoft Business Central seem to be the ones that round it out in the middle of the area and up to some of the larger ones. And then, SAP, I don't see much Epicor, to be honest with you, and Macola. Those are very traditional products, but not to say that they're not out there, but I don't see much in our client base, and those are the main ones. And then on the front end wise, we're seeing a lot of not-for-profits move to having their own websites, et cetera, and using, like on here you have WooCommerce, but Shopify, Magento, et cetera. And having more tools like Salesforce.com, which is more of a customer relationship management in not-for-profit space, might be a donor management or a membership management tool in that regard. So we're seeing a little bit more horsepower behind that. Devin, I don't know if you have a different thought from what you're seeing on your side, on the accounting side.
No, for the most, the only one I'll throw in just dealing with the MIP on any grant-heavy agency feels to be kind of the traditional. But definitely on the forward-facing side, your Salesforce, your Razor's Edge, and that sort of thing are probably the only ones that you didn't bring up. But for the most part, yeah, smaller size, you're going to be dealing predominantly with QuickBooks and kind of branching up from there. So,
got it. There you go,
Great.
Steve. That's what we're dealing with.
So Thank you very much for the insight. That's really helpful. It's pretty much in line with what we've seen from our end as well. And you'll notice, quite a few of the software systems that you see up on this screen, which is now the correct one, were mentioned by both Wally and Devin in terms of utilization for not-for-profits. And we know that there's some variety out there. Not everyone's using the same platform. Just because it tends to be the most popular doesn't mean that other systems aren't utilized. And as an example of that, we actually just started working with a brand new not-for-profit client within the past couple weeks. They're based out in Maryland, and they are an affordable housing not-for-profit. And what they're utilizing payments for is they use Sage 100, which you see there in a big white font on a green background towards the top of the graphic, to invoice rent payments each month. Now, obviously, this is assisted rent, so the resident isn't having to pay the entire amount from their own pocket, but they need to invoice those monthly rent amounts, and it's a recurring payment, right? They want to set it up to automatically take that payment each month and apply to an invoice, so they are able to use and leverage the EBizCharge platform to have an email go out to that particular resident. They see the invoice number, they see that the amount is what they're expecting, they're able to import payment information, and thereafter, every single month, it automatically would hit that card for that exact amount so that they can collect that rent on an ongoing basis. Without a lot of effort, without inconveniencing the resident by giving them a more cumbersome process to have to go through to make that payment, everybody wins. So that's just one use case. Obviously, there are many, many others, but having the flexibility to automate payments in that manner within anything ranging from, on the small end, QuickBooks, to up higher, maybe a NetSuite or a Sage Intacct, for your sales force, right? When you're reaching out and trying to build relationships, oftentimes that yields a sales order, right? Where you're trying to get a donation or you're trying to get some sort of a subscription generated. EBizCharge is integrated to Salesforce as well to be able to take a payment directly within Salesforce without having to leave the application, and it offers that same functionality to send out an email. I mostly speak about credit card payments because that tends to be, the pretty heavy focus with a lot of the organizations we've worked with in the past. But of course, when we say credit card, we're including debit card in that as well. And with pretty much every solution you see here on the screen, there is also the ability to accept electronic check bank account payments also. So it's not simply limited to plastic. You can also definitely accept payments with a routing and an account number, which definitely cuts down on the number of vendors. We found that a lot of not-for-profits are set up maybe with their bank, right? And they simply have bank-to-bank ACH transfers that are occurring where they have to log in to their bank, set up that specific payer, right, with their routing and account number. And it's logistically not an easy process, and you have to do that every time. A lot easier just to be able to have a link generated, sent over via an email, let that person choose their payment method and initiate that payment to you as quickly and easily as possible before they change their mind. So within these applications, in addition to having that ability to initiate that payment and get that link sent over to the customer, there is also auto reconciliation that occurs in the background. So this relates back to one of the popular answers to poll question number 1. From the standpoint of simplifying AR procedures, that we often see organizations that have donations that are made, they have payments that come in, and they have some sort of a reporting platform like one of the ones I mentioned earlier, CyberSource, Authorize.net, PayEasy, whatever that platform may be, where they can export reports, they can view detailed information and sort based on what they're looking at from a transaction history standpoint. That's all good and well, but someone is having to go back into a Sage Intacct or into a NetSuite or into a QuickBooks and actually create received payments in that application, or somehow mark that those payments have been taken so that the books are aligned, right? So that everything is reflecting correctly from an accounting standpoint. That takes time. That takes a person away from something else that they could be doing. And we know a lot of nonprofit organizations are stretched quite thin, right? And time is a very valuable commodity. So it would be fantastic to be able to return some of that time and focus on other projects to expand and grow and provide even more services. So with these applications, it's really important to make sure you have something that is taking that payment that gets made and automatically applying that both to an invoice if one exists within one of these accounting systems, or applies it to the specific customer in Salesforce, for example. If you have an e-commerce application like Magento was brought up earlier in WooCommerce, you want to be able to have that payment made right at the time that they're checking out to buy tickets for an event, or checking out to buy merchandise, clothing, promotional products, whatever it may be that you're offering to bring that person in. That way, it's automating that process and simplifying your accounts receivable. So there are quite a few solutions like that out there. EBizCharge definitely offers solutions for each of these accounting systems, e-commerce platforms, and Salesforce, as well as other CRM platforms to help automate that piece of the puzzle. So that should, and let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen again here, because now you have me wondering. You should see poll question number 3. How confident are you in your business being fully PCI compliant? Great. So not to steal your thunder, Ashley, by reading the question, but I'll let you take it over from here.
Perfect. So how confident are you in your business being fully PCI compliant? Very confident, moderately confident, slightly confident, or not confident at all? So this is the 3rd polling question out of 4 today. The votes are flying in. All right, we have some positive results so far. And we almost have 100% of the votes. Let's see if we can get to that. And then I will close out. All right, 100% of the votes. I will close it out and share the results. So we have 38% moderately confident, 31% slightly confident, 23% very confident, and only 8% are not confident.
All right, I like when people walk around with a little bit of swagger behind them. That's good to have that high level of confidence. I think there has been a good amount of education over the past few years specifically, and I'm sure if you're working with the team here at Withum, right, they're pointing you in the right direction in terms of making sure that you are securely taking payment information and attesting to your PCI compliance properly. So that's great to hear. I'm glad everyone has that level of confidence, or at least many people do. There's a lot to PCI compliant, I think, that organizations, companies don't necessarily have access to. So we can definitely speak to a bit of that. Most people are doing most things right most of the time, but all it takes is that one vulnerability, right? That one piece of the puzzle that wasn't put together quite right through no fault of anybody's for someone to be able to sneak in and take advantage. I think it was pretty jarring for those of us that followed the news over the past few years with regards to data breaches and payment information that was compromised, to see big names, right? Target, Home Depot, Lowe's. We've even seen the Pentagon breached, although not for payment information. Sony had that big breach a couple years ago. I think the most prominent one that affected more of us than any other was the breach that happened with Equifax, right? I think that was, from what I read, 170 million Americans had personal information compromised. So it's, I think it's important to reflect on large organizations like that you would imagine have teams of people devoted strictly to making sure that their security measures are up to snuff and in line, and that people are still able to get past those high levels of defenses. So it certainly has made us think as a provider, and the conclusion that we've drawn is, in addition to good security practices of not writing down payment information, not keeping that information in a drawer or a locked drawer or on an Excel spreadsheet, of course, or written down on paper, making sure you limit the number of people that have access to highly sensitive data. All of those things are extremely important, but ultimately, the way that payment information comes in the first place, and how, if at all, it gets saved for future use, ends up being the most important consideration. And from that standpoint, the concept that has proved the most resilient over the years and that we have not yet seen a breach with is a process called tokenization. That word may be familiar to some of you. It may be completely foreign to others. What tokenization does is tokenization takes encryption one step further. So let me define encryption first. With credit card information specifically, or a routing number and an account number for an electronic check or bank account type payment, obviously having that full card number, that full account number, right, creates risk. Because if you have that saved somewhere, someone can gain access to it who shouldn't have it. They take it, they try to use it for nefarious purposes. The initial approach to securing that information that we saw was encryption, which is pretty complex. Just to simplify it a bit, think of encryption as basically just jumbling up the information, right? So if you have a 16-digit credit card number, let's say, that starts with a 4 and ends with a 2, you might jumble up those numbers and save them within your software system or on your Magento or Shopify or WooCommerce platform, and simply just have it out of order, or maybe it starts with a 7 and it ends with a 1, you know, and that 4 and 2 are somewhere in the middle. That measure is better than doing nothing, certainly, right? It's better to have encryption than to not have encryption. But unfortunately, we're living in a digital age, right? We're talking through digital payments and all the new challenges those present. And the people who are looking to, you know, commit fraud and compromise this sensitive data are very savvy, right? And they've created scripts that operate on an automated basis. They have bots that do this work for them oftentimes. They're able simply to take that encrypted card number and say, okay, well, there's this obstacle for me to overcome. There's a level of encryption here. It looks like they're trying to make this tough for me. No worries, there are only 16 digits in this sequence. I'm going to run an automated program to take all of those 16 digits and try every possible combination until I find the right one that goes through. And you may have had that experience if you ever had a cyber attack where, you know, you had 150 transaction attempts go through within a 3 or 4 second period of time. We've had folks that have come to us from other providers that have shared that experience. That's typically what's going on, something along those lines. They're trying to decrypt that encryption, and ultimately, there always is a way. And usually that encryption is done the same way for all the payment methods that are stored. So if someone is able to crack the code and decrypt, depending on the type of encryption that's used, theoretically they could use that to obtain additional, you know, payment methods and information. So going one step beyond encryption, we've moved to tokenization. What tokenization is tokenization allows for that card information or that bank account information to be obtained. You can save it on file, but what happens is that entire number, that entire account number, is completely replaced with a completely different string of letters and numbers. So you basically would have A1 to B4 Z X Y C3, right? Something along those lines that would simply represent that credit card number or that bank account information. We refer to that as a token. Probably a better word for it is a symbol. It's basically just a symbol that represents that payment information. So that is what gets stored within your Sage Intacct. That is what gets stored within NetSuite. That is what gets stored within just your basic payment gateway. That is what gets stored within your Magento or WooCommerce online shopping cart for merchandise. That information can't be easily related back, right? In order for someone to actually breach and compromise a tokenized payment method, they would have to not only gain access to your system and be able to identify what that token is, they would have to also gain access to our system, right? And be able to identify what that token represents. And on that end, we also double up by utilizing encryption. So once that card information or that bank account information gets entered, we simply take that information, replace it with a token in your system, so you can continue referencing that. You can see the last 4 digits of the bank account number or the card number, so you can easily identify and make sure you're taking a payment or a donation with the correct payment method in the future when that customer wants to pay you again. But on the back end, we take on the liability for hosting that payment information. And on our end, we are encrypting it. We're spreading that encrypted number across multiple servers throughout the United States. That way, you're adding 3, 4, 5 levels that someone would have to breach. And to my knowledge, this could be off base, but at least the last time we checked within the last few months, we are not aware of any fully tokenized with encryption behind it, payment information systems that to date have been breached. So like I mentioned before, those who are looking to do us harm, who are trying to compromise sensitive payment information, are always trying to gain the advantage. So we need to be vigilant and make sure that, if we need to further enhance these measures, we do. If someone cracks this code, we'll build something better. But as of right now, if you're not certain that what you're using is in fact tokenization, definitely worth a conversation to make sure that you are using a fully tokenized and PCI compliant system. Great. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move on here to some examples of what integration can do for your organization. So this particular example is on an invoice, right? It looks like it's actually a customer payment directly within QuickBooks, right? But it could be Sage Intacct, it could be NetSuite, it could be any type of system. So with integration, it allows you to not have to leave whatever application you're using and then go to a separate payment acceptance program and re-enter either an amount that you're trying to take a payment for, or the customer's information, their billing address, for example. That information all gets pulled over automatically via integration. So if you're using some sort of a subscription management software, some sort of an event planning software, like we mentioned before, an accounting software, this is an example of where having a payment provider that has an in-house development team can be very effective, right? Because you can cut down on the amount of re-entry and work that is needed by simply having these screens pull up directly within your software system. And just using us as an example, I mentioned earlier that we have over 100 different payment integrations that are currently available. Those didn't just appear out of thin air, right? I mean, there are a few that we know, a few systems that are extremely popular, like those that we've mentioned throughout this call, specifically on the accounting and e-commerce side of things, where even without a customer having to request it, that's something that we built proactively, knowing that it would benefit a number of potential customers. But we've also had folks that started working with us and they said, I'm using this membership management program and they don't really have a good integration right now that allows me to set up recurring billing, right, or allows me to take donations from folks and have them stored in the system and not have to have access to that payment information. Is there anything that you can do? That's where a lot of these integrations have come from. So if you're using a platform like that, if you're using a system that either you're not sure that the system that's in place is compliant, is using tokenization, or is giving you the full range of tools we've talked about, like being able to send out email requests to folks, that's definitely something worth looking into more so you can streamline that AR side of things. So with that said, moving on here for a second, we can show you an example of what that might look like. This, I think, is important from, at least for the not-for-profit organizations that I've worked with personally. There are a lot of events that we see not-for-profit organizations planning, right? You might have some sort of a fundraiser, you may have an event in the community. For example, one of the organizations that I just spoke with last week, they provide different types of services for adults with developmental disabilities. And every single month, they have an art fair that they put on. So they invite the community at large to come to this art fair. The individuals that they provide services to put together, these paintings and ceramics and all kinds of different pieces that they then put up for sale so that they can try to raise funds to promote what they're doing, right, and get revenue through the door. They are able to hit their existing donor base, folks that have contributed in the past, by utilizing a function like what you see on the screen, an email pay system where it will automatically send out an email to every single one of those folks that they've done business with in the past. And there's a preset template that can be changed in terms of the verbiage, but it would look something like this, letting them know that they have an event, here's the amount. All you have to do is just click here to register and make this payment. And then the beautiful thing is if your system is integrated with this, it will also take that payment and reflect your accounting software. But even if it's not, this can be used as a standalone as well. So again, from an AR standpoint, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to register for events, to make donations, to bring in that revenue. If some of these tools aren't on your radar currently and you're not utilizing them, definitely something that you're going to want to move towards in the future. Similarly, there is a portal. So if you do have something like that rent example that I provided earlier from the residential company in Maryland. We do have the ability for folks to log in and view a history of the payments they've made to you, be able to access, if you do invoice from an accounting software, invoices as well, so that they can see all that information, go in and pay multiple amounts at once with a single credit card or bank account. And everything is fully branded to your organization, like you see here with some of the examples on the screen. I think from my end, lastly, before we move on to poll question number 4, I just want to briefly touch on mobile payments. So again, back to the example of events, you can see here there's an example of a mobile app, right, where you can take a quick payment, you can pay invoices if that's something that's applicable to you. You also have the ability to look at past transactions and, of course, issue refunds. This is huge, right? I know a lot of nonprofit organizations have some sort of a system through their bank or their processor of choice in the office, but when they go to an event, they don't really have a solution from that provider. So Square is a very popular system for that, where you can simply download the Square app. There's a reader where you can insert a credit card in person. And for example, if you're at that art event for the organization that works with people with disabilities, right, that's a very simple, quick, and convenient way to take payments. The problem is it doesn't tie back with anything, right? You simply now have another third-party system that you have to refer to a transaction log from and update your Intact or your NetSuite or your QuickBooks accordingly. With this EBizCharge mobile app, the big difference is it runs very similarly to what you might see with one of those other providers, but it's fully integrated back into all of those systems we talked about earlier. So again, streamlining the process, one provider instead of many. That is kind of the takeaway that you want to have, is how can I make things easier on myself so I can focus my time and focus the time of my team members more and more on other parts of running our organization smoothly. So with that said, Ashley, I think we're ready to move on to poll question number 4.
All righty. Polling question 4, the last one. What do you think the biggest new challenge will be in 2021 for your role? Staff or skill shortages, an increase in workload, dealing with inefficient processes, working remote, or company changes? And this is the last polling question of the session today. So just be sure to get in. All right, we're going to close it out. So the results are dealing with inefficient processes is at 42%. 33% of the votes were for staff or skill shortages. 17% for an increase in workload. 8% in working remote, and 0% voted for company changes.
All right. Well, I can definitely relate. I think many of us can, to the issue with staff or skill shortages. I think especially right now, I know we've been having some difficulty bringing folks in the door, so definitely understand that. And in terms of dealing with inefficient processes, right, I think that's the overall purpose of our conversation here today, is to try to make some of those processes more efficient, streamline things, make things a little more effective. So wonderful. Thank you everyone for your participation there. And at this point, I appreciate everybody's time. I'd love to open it up to Wally and Devin if you have anything else that you'd like to share, or if there are any questions. I'm more than happy to take questions at whatever you feel would be best.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stephen. I guess, Ashley, are there any questions? Kind of, if not, I can, say some comments to kind of wrap up. But maybe not then. Okay. So yeah.
Any questions there, Devin?
Okay, great. Just want to make sure. So yeah, so kind of just to sum up, why we want to make sure it wasn't important to kind of get this presentation out to everyone today. It's just, I think we've all learned a lot, within the past year of this kind of pandemic environment, especially within the not-for-profit side, and just, kind of seeing across the board how at least most organizations have kind of adopted one or two processes, either being some sort of automated payments out or definitely some sort of lockbox system coming in, and just the idea that electronic payment systems are not going to be going away, right? It's going to become the new norm, and I think just kind of laying out all the benefits that they bring, with the idea of being the integrated system, really resulting in an ease of transactions. Again, just cutting out some of the redundant and removal of any errors that may arise from manual processes, right? So if systems are automatically talking to each other, again, it's saving time, it's saving errors, things like that. Also, as Stephen talked about the ease of transactions, right? I can't tell you how many times going to, well, back when galas were a thing, hopefully they'll be back sometime soon, the pass the hat or other things that occur, and again, trying to track and record properly all those donations that may occur at that time. If you just had something simple as a mobile app where credit cards could be received and recorded and again on the spot, I think would just be eye-opening to a lot of people just from the user transaction side. Again, with the improving of cybersecurity, I want to say, speaking with clients, I don't, most I would say have weekly, if not, twice a month attempts of phishing attacks. I feel like, and all it takes is just, one slip up to get into the system and just, unleash a whole mess of trouble. And it's not just losing your own data, but then it's also, if a breach does happen, the costs and then everything on the back end of having to alert any of your potential donors or things like that a breach had occurred. So you have to remember just the impact on both the reputational side as well, right? Your names might be out there. You have to notify the state and a number of other people. It just becomes a large headache. So anything that can improve the security of any payment information and keep that information private would be, a welcome godsend. Improved collections would be the other part. I think COVID's had an impact on AR balances kind of for almost every agency I've been dealing with so far over the past year, and they just seem to be growing and growing and growing. And just to be able to ease and save the time of having to follow up with collections, I think would be invaluable to most organizations. And then finally, I'll just point to alleviating that staffing crunch, right? I think we're all feeling it, kind of as Stephen said. Even on us on the Withum side, it's just kind of hard at times to get good people in the good spots that you need them in. And so that if we can kind of alleviate the need for any manpower and can automate that thing, I think it's going to help streamline any organization to go ahead and kind of emerge from this pandemic, hopefully a little bit maybe better than we entered it. So, Wally, I don't know if you have anything to add in closing remarks.
No, I think that was excellent. Nice way to sum it up and tie the sort of operational side of not-for-profits to the payment side. And on the technology side, we see a lot of the same pain points that are existing. The pandemic is driving sort of cloud or remote access to information, and I think you summed it up nicely. So unless there's any questions, we'll hand it back to Ashley to close us out.
All right, it does not look like we have any questions in, but as we usually say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out directly to our presenters. My email is also accessible, so you can reach out to me. And just be sure to take the survey that will appear after we close out this session. We like getting your feedback and seeing what you guys are interested in hearing about next. But on my end, I think that's it. I would just like to thank our presenters today for speaking, Devin, Walter, and Stephen. And as I said, if anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. Other than that, have a good day.